The Velkari Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Their empire stretched across 3 galactic arms. They had conquered over 200 species. Some had fought back. Some had tried to run. All had failed. The Velkari were masters of war, and their fleet was the largest in known space. High Arbiter Thesson sat on his throne aboard the command ship Eternal Shadow. He was old, even by Velkari standards. His gray skin hung loose on his tall frame. His 4 eyes had seen countless worlds burn. He had personally ordered the destruction of 12 species who had refused to submit. He felt no guilt. This was simply how the universe worked. The strong ruled. The weak served. A junior officer approached his throne and bowed low. High Arbiter, the survey teams have returned from the Outer Rim. They found something interesting. Thesson waved one of his 4 arms lazily. Show me. A hologram appeared before him. It showed a small yellow star with 8 planets orbiting it. The 3rd planet was covered in blue water and green land. Thesson could see lights on its night side. A civilization lived there. The species calls themselves humans, the officer explained. They have basic space travel. They have colonized their moon and sent probes to nearby planets. Their military technology is approximately 5,000 years behind ours. Thesson studied the hologram with mild interest. The humans seemed unremarkable. Just another primitive species waiting to be harvested. What resources does their system contain? Rich deposits of heavy metals on the 4th planet. Several gas giants suitable for fuel extraction. The species itself shows promise as a labor force. They are adaptable and breed quickly. Thesson nodded slowly. This was good news. The Dominion always needed more workers for the mining colonies. Send a diplomatic cruiser. Deliver the standard terms. They have 30 cycles to respond. The officer bowed again. It will be done. High Arbiter. 3 days later, the diplomatic cruiser Mercy's End dropped out of hyperspace near Earth. It was not a large ship by Velkari standards, but it was still 5 kilometers long. Its weapons could glass a continent in minutes. The ship's commander, a young female named Veth, had done this many times before. She knew exactly what would happen. The primitives would panic. They would send frightened messages begging for explanation. Then they would surrender. They always surrendered. Veth opened a channel and began transmitting in the dominant languages of Earth. The message was simple. Humanity had 30 cycles to accept the following terms. First, they would swear eternal loyalty to the Velkari Dominion. Second, they would pay tribute in the form of rare metals and minerals. Third, they would provide 50 million workers each year for the labor colonies. In exchange, the Dominion would allow humanity to continue existing. The message ended with a warning. Any attempt to resist would result in the complete destruction of Earth and the extinction of the human species. The Velkari did not make threats. They made promises. Veth sat back and waited for the response. She expected panicked transmissions within hours. Instead, she got silence. 1 day passed, then 2, then 5. Earth sent nothing. No messages of surrender. No pleas for mercy. No attempts at negotiation. Just silence. On the 10th day, Veth noticed something strange. Her sensors detected massive energy spikes across Earth's surface. Power plants were spinning up to maximum capacity. Underground facilities that had not appeared on initial scans were suddenly radiating enormous amounts of heat. Something was happening down there, but she could not tell what. She reported this to High Arbiter Thesson. He dismissed her concerns. They are probably preparing evacuation ships. Primitives always try to run before they accept the inevitable. Continue monitoring. On the 20th day, all transmissions from Earth stopped completely. Every satellite went dark. Every radio signal ceased. The planet seemed to have gone completely silent. Veth felt a strange sensation in her stomach. She had conquered 11 species, and none of them had ever acted like this. Fear made species talk more, not less. What were the humans doing? She tried scanning the rest of the solar system. Her sensors glitched. They showed strange readings near the gas giants, gravitational distortions, energy signatures. But when she tried to focus on them, the readings disappeared. Equipment malfunction, she told herself. Nothing more. On the 29th day, High Arbiter Thesson lost patience. He contacted Veth directly. His 4 eyes narrowed with annoyance. These humans test my patience. I am sending a patrol fleet to encourage their response. 12 warships should be sufficient to remind them of their situation. Veth acknowledged the order, but she could not shake her unease. Something about this species felt wrong. They were too quiet, too calm. It was almost as if they were waiting for something. She pushed the thought away. That was ridiculous. What could a primitive species possibly be waiting for? They had no fleet. They had no weapons that could challenge the Dominion. They were insects beneath the boot of an empire that had crushed civilizations for millennia. The patrol fleet would arrive in 2 days. Then the humans would learn what happened to species that kept the Valkyrie waiting. Veth looked at the blue planet on her view screen. It hung in space, peaceful and silent. She wondered if the humans understood how little time they had left. She wondered if they were praying to whatever gods they believed in. She had no way of knowing that beneath the clouds, in facilities hidden deep underground, humanity was not praying. They were building. They had been building for a very long time, and they were almost ready. The patrol fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system on the 30th day. 12 warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Each ship was 3 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Fleet Commander Krath stood on his bridge and looked at his tactical display. He saw Earth, small and blue and defenseless. Krath was a veteran of 40 campaigns. He had broken the backs of proud warrior races. He had watched entire civilizations crumble before his guns. This mission bored him. A primitive species with no fleet was not worthy of 12 warships. One would have been enough. But High Arbiter Thesson wanted to send a message, and Krath would deliver it. "Scan the system," he ordered. "Show me what these humans have." His sensors swept across the solar system. They found satellites around Earth, a small station orbiting their moon, a few outposts on the 4th planet, nothing that could challenge even a single Valkyrie patrol ship. Krath laughed. "This is what kept us waiting for 30 cycles. These primitives have nothing. Open a channel. Tell them their time is up." Before his communications officer could respond, the sensors glitched. Strange readings appeared near the largest gas giant. Krath frowned. "What is that?" The officer checked his instruments. His face went pale. "Commander, I am detecting gravitational distortions near the 5th planet. They are consistent with..." He stopped. His hands were shaking. "Consistent with what?" Krath demanded. "Ships, Commander." "Many ships." Krath felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "How many?" The officer did not answer. He was staring at his screen with wide eyes. Krath pushed him aside and looked at the readings himself. What he saw made his blood freeze. The distortions were not near just one planet. They were near all of them. Behind the gas giants, behind the ice worlds, behind every large body in the system. And they were not small distortions. They were massive. Each one indicated thousands of ships. "That is impossible," Krath whispered. "Primitives cannot have a transmission cut through all channels." It was in perfect Valkyrie, spoken by a human voice. The words were simple. "You should have sent more." Then the ships appeared. They came from behind Jupiter first. They emerged from the planet's shadow like a swarm of angry insects. Krath's tactical display struggled to count them. 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. The numbers kept climbing. Then more ships appeared from behind Saturn. Then from behind Uranus and Neptune. The entire system was suddenly filled with contacts. Krath stared at his screen in disbelief. This was not possible. Where had these ships come from? How had the humans built them? His empire had surveyed this system 3 years ago. There had been nothing here. Nothing but primitives playing with rockets. The human ships were like nothing he had ever seen. They were angular and brutal. They had no curves, no elegance. They were designed for one purpose only: war. Some were small and fast, moving in tight formations. Others were enormous, larger than anything in the Valkyrie fleet. And they were all heading straight toward his patrol fleet. "All ships, raise shields," Krath screamed. "Weapons online, form defensive." He never finished the order. The human ships opened fire. Beams of pure white energy lanced across space. They punched through Valkyrie shields like they were made of paper. Krath watched in horror as the ship next to his simply vanished. One moment it was there. The next moment it was an expanding cloud of debris. More beams followed. More ships died. The Valkyrie tried to fight back, but their weapons could not penetrate the human shields. Their missiles were shot down before they could reach their targets. This was not a battle. This was an execution. Krath's ship shook as energy beams struck its hull. Warning alarms screamed. Systems failed one after another. He knew he was going to die, but he had to warn the Dominion. He had to tell them what he had seen. Send all sensor data to High Arbiter Thessan, he shouted. Tell him. Tell him we were wrong about the humans. Tell him. A final beam struck his ship's reactor. The explosion was brief and bright. Krath and his crew were dead before they could feel pain. The battle lasted 11 seconds. 12 Valkyrie warships, the pride of the Dominion's patrol fleet, were reduced to floating wreckage. Not a single human ship was damaged. Far across the galaxy, High Arbiter Thessan received the sensor data. He watched the recording of the battle with growing horror. He saw the impossible numbers. He saw the devastating weapons. He saw his fleet die like insects beneath a boot. For the first time in his long life, High Arbiter Thessan felt fear. The humans had not begged. They had not surrendered. They had not even tried to negotiate. They had simply waited until the Valkyrie came close enough to kill. And now Thessan understood a terrible truth. His empire had not found a primitive species to conquer. His empire had awakened something far worse. Something that had been hiding. Something that had been waiting. He called an emergency meeting of the Dominion's War Council. The time for intimidation was over. This would require the Grand Fleet itself. The Valkyrie Dominion went into panic. The destruction of the patrol fleet was impossible to explain. How could a primitive species destroy 12 warships in seconds? How could they have so many ships? The questions burned through the halls of power like wildfire. High Arbiter Thessan demanded answers. He sent his best intelligence operatives to dig through every piece of data the Dominion had ever collected about humanity. He wanted to know everything. Their history, their technology, their secrets. Something had to explain what he had witnessed. The operatives worked for days. They analyzed old survey reports. They studied intercepted human communications from decades past. They pieced together fragments of information that previous analysts had ignored as unimportant. And slowly, a terrifying picture began to emerge. It started with an incident from 200 years ago. A strange object had fallen from the sky in Earth's northern territories. The humans had hidden it quickly. Official reports called it a meteor. But the Dominion's deep scans showed something different. The object had been made of metal. It had been artificial. It had been a probe from another civilization. The operatives dug deeper. They found evidence that the humans had taken the probe to a secret facility. They had spent years studying it. The probe had contained star charts showing thousands of inhabited worlds. It had contained basic technology schematics far beyond human science. And most importantly, it had contained a warning. The warning was simple. The galaxy was full of predators. Species that conquered and enslaved. Species that destroyed anyone weaker than themselves. The probe had been sent by a dying civilization to warn others, to give them a chance to prepare. The humans had listened. After discovering the probe, humanity's governments had done something remarkable. They had stopped fighting each other. Publicly, they continued their small wars and political arguments, but secretly, they had united for a single purpose: survival. They knew that someday, something would come from the stars. And when it did, they intended to be ready. They built shipyards inside hollowed-out asteroids where no one could see them. They developed new technologies in underground facilities that did not appear on any map. They trained millions of soldiers and pilots in secret bases scattered across the solar system. Every major nation contributed. Every government sacrificed. For 2 centuries, humanity prepared for a war they hoped would never come. The technology they developed was terrifying. The probe had contained theories that the Valkyrie had dismissed as impractical. Energy weapons that required too much power. Shield generators that were too unstable. Faster than light drives that were too dangerous. The humans did not care about practical. They cared about survival. They built the impossible weapons anyway. High Arbiter Thessan read the intelligence report with growing dread. The humans had not been primitive. They had been hiding. Their visible space program, with its clumsy rockets and small stations, had been a mask. A lie designed to make them look weak. Behind that mask, they had built an armada. But the report contained something even more disturbing. The operatives had found evidence that humanity had not spent 2 centuries just preparing for defense. They had been sending out their own probes, mapping the galaxy, identifying threats. They had known about the Valkyrie Dominion for over 50 years. They had studied the Dominion's tactics. They had analyzed the Dominion's weaknesses. They had designed their ships specifically to fight the Velkari fleet. Thesan felt sick as he understood the truth. His empire had not stumbled upon an easy conquest. His empire had walked into a trap that had been waiting for 50 years. The humans had known this day would come. They had been counting the days until someone knocked on their door, and they had answered that knock with an armada. The intelligence chief stood before Thesan with his head bowed. "High Arbiter, we underestimated them completely. Our initial surveys only detected their public facilities. We had no idea what was hiding beneath the surface." Thesan crushed the report in his hand. "How many ships do they have? Give me a number." The intelligence chief hesitated. "Our estimates suggest at least 50,000 combat vessels. Possibly more." The number hung in the air like a death sentence. The entire Velkari Grand Fleet numbered only 2,000 ships. Even with their superior experience, those odds were devastating. But Thesan was not ready to accept defeat. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had crushed enemies who seemed unstoppable. They would crush this enemy too. "Mobilize the Grand Fleet," he commanded. "Every ship, every soldier. We will go to Sol and we will burn that planet to ash. These humans want a war. We will give them a war they will never forget." His officers bowed and hurried to obey. Across the Dominion, warships began moving toward a single destination. The largest military force ever assembled by the Velkari was heading toward Earth, but in the shadows, watching through hidden sensors, the humans saw them coming, and they smiled. The grand fleet of the Velkari Dominion gathered at the edge of their territory, 2,000 dreadnoughts, each one a monster of metal and fire, 5,000 support ships carrying supplies and soldiers, 300 carriers filled with fighter craft. This was the full military might of an empire that had never known defeat. High Arbiter Thesan stood aboard his flagship, the Eternal Shadow. He looked at the assembled fleet and felt pride swelling in his chest. This force had broken the backs of warrior civilizations. It had crushed rebellions that seemed hopeless. No primitive species could stand against such power, no matter how many ships they had built in their asteroid hiding places. "Begin the jump to Sol," he commanded. "Show these humans what it means to challenge the Dominion." The fleet entered hyperspace together. The journey took 3 days. Thesan spent that time reviewing battle plans. His admirals had developed multiple strategies. They would surround the human fleet. They would use their experience to outmaneuver the primitives. They would teach humanity a lesson that would echo through eternity. On the 4th day, the Grand Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Thesan walked to his observation window to watch his fleet emerge from the stars. He expected to see the human ships scattered across the system, desperately trying to form defensive lines. What he saw instead stopped his heart. The human armada was already waiting for them. But Thesan's intelligence reports had been wrong. There were not 50,000 ships. There were far more. They filled space in every direction, layer after layer of warships, arranged in perfect formation. The tactical displays on every Velkari ship went wild trying to count the contacts. 100,000, 200,000. The numbers kept climbing. Thesan stared at the impossible sight. The human ships were so densely packed that they blocked out the stars behind them. The sky itself had turned black with warships, and they were not small ships. He saw carriers larger than small moons. He saw battleships covered in weapon systems he could not identify. At the center of the formation floated vessels of impossible scale, their hulls scarred with burn marks and impact craters from battles no one had ever recorded. "By the ancient gods," whispered one of his admirals. Where did they all come from? Thesan had no answer. He had expected to find a desperate enemy fighting for survival. Instead, he had found something else. Something that looked like it had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. A transmission reached the flagship. A human face appeared on the view screen. It was an old woman with gray hair and calm eyes. She wore a simple military uniform with no decorations. When she spoke, her voice was steady and cold. "I am Admiral Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. You entered our system with hostile intent 30 days ago. You threatened our planet and our people. You demanded our surrender." She paused. "We have a counteroffer." Thesan found his voice. "You dare to make demands of the Dominion? We will destroy you." Admiral Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You will withdraw every ship from every system within 500 light-years of Sol. You will release every species you have enslaved within that radius. You will do this within one standard cycle. The demand was absurd. Thessan almost laughed. And, if we refuse, the Admiral's smile faded. Then you will learn why we built all these ships. Thessan cut the transmission. His pride would not allow him to negotiate with primitives. He turned to his tactical officers. All ships, attack formation. Target their command vessels. We end this now. The Grand Fleet surged forward. 2,000 dreadnoughts opened fire. Beams of energy and clouds of missiles raced toward the human formation. For a moment, Thessan felt hope. His weapons would tear through their shields. His experience would overcome their numbers. Victory would be his. Then the humans fired back. Light filled the void. Not the red beams of Velkari weapons, but white light so bright it blinded sensors. The light struck the lead ships of the Grand Fleet, and they simply ceased to exist. No explosions, no debris. They were there, and then they were gone. The human ships moved forward. They did not charge recklessly like primitives. They moved with perfect coordination, flowing around the Velkari formation like water around stones. Their weapons fired continuously. Ship after ship vanished under the assault. Thessan watched his fleet die. His admirals screamed orders. His captains tried to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. The humans were everywhere. Their ships surrounded the Grand Fleet like a closing fist. 11 minutes. That was how long the battle lasted. 11 minutes to destroy an empire that had ruled for 10,000 years. When the firing stopped, not a single Velkari warship remained. The Grand Fleet, the pride of the Dominion, had become a field of floating wreckage. Thessan's flagship was the last to fall. As his ship broke apart around him, he saw the human vessels moving through the debris. They were not celebrating. They were not gloating. They were simply moving on to the next objective. His final thought, before the void claimed him, was a simple question. What had they awakened? The news of the Grand Fleet's destruction spread across the galaxy like a shockwave. The Velkari Dominion, which had seemed eternal and unbreakable, suddenly looked fragile. Their greatest military force had been wiped out in minutes by a species they had dismissed as primitive. The empire that had ruled through fear now had something to fear itself. Within days, the human armada reached the Dominion's core systems. Their ships surrounded world after world. But something strange happened. The humans did not burn cities. They did not demand slaves. They did not force anyone to kneel before them. Instead, they sent a simple message to every planet they approached. We are not here to conquer. We are here to free. The enslaved species of the Dominion could not believe it at first. For generations, they had known only chains and cruelty. They had been told that this was how the universe worked. The strong ruled, the weak served. There was no other way. But the humans offered a different way. On world after world, human soldiers landed not as conquerors but as liberators. They opened the labor camps. They broke the chains. They told the freed peoples that they were no longer property. They were citizens of their own worlds again. The Velkari government collapsed within weeks. Without their Grand Fleet, they had no way to enforce their rule. Without fear, they had no way to keep their subjects in line. The species they had crushed for millennia rose up against them. The empire crumbled like a sandcastle before the tide. But humanity did not simply walk away and leave chaos behind. They stayed. They helped. Human engineers arrived on devastated worlds with technology and supplies. They helped rebuild cities that the Dominion had destroyed. They shared medical knowledge that saved millions of lives. They asked for nothing in return except friendship. Admiral Chen, who had commanded the battle against the Grand Fleet, became the face of this new era. She traveled from world to world, meeting with leaders of freed species. She proposed something that had never existed in this part of the galaxy, a true alliance. Not an empire where one species ruled over others, but a partnership where all species stood as equals. They called it the Galactic Compact. Every member had an equal voice. Every member contributed what they could, and every member was protected by the combined strength of all the others. The human armada did not disband after the war. It continued to patrol the trade routes, protecting merchant ships from pirates. It responded to distress calls from anyone who needed help. It stood ready to defend any world that was threatened. But the humans never used their power to dominate. They used it to protect. Other empires watched from distant regions of the galaxy. They had heard the stories about the Velkari's defeat. They had seen the sensor recordings of the battle. They knew that challenging humanity would be suicide. But they also knew something else. The humans were still building ships. Their shipyards were still running at full capacity. Their fleets were still growing. A delegation from one of these distant empires visited Earth to ask a question that many species wanted answered. They met with the leaders of the United Earth government in a simple conference room. No thrones, no intimidation, just chairs around a table. "You have the power to rule the galaxy," the ambassador said. "You could crush any enemy. You could take any world. Why do you not use this power for conquest?" The human leader, a tired-looking man with kind eyes, thought about the question for a long moment before answering. 200 years ago, we found a message from a dying civilization. They warned us that the galaxy was full of predators, species that destroyed anyone weaker than themselves. For 2 centuries, we lived in fear. We built our fleet because we believed we had to become predators ourselves to survive. He paused and looked at the ambassador directly. But when the moment came, we made a different choice. We remembered what it felt like to be small and afraid and alone. We remembered how much we wished someone would come to help us, and we decided that if we had the power to protect the weak, we had the duty to do so. The ambassador considered this answer. "But you continue to build ships. You continue to prepare for war. Why?" The human smiled sadly. "Because we remember. The galaxy is still full of predators. Somewhere out there, other empires are watching and waiting. When they come, and they will come, we will be ready to meet them. Not for conquest, not for glory, but for protection, for justice, for everyone who cannot protect themselves." The ambassador returned to his empire with a warning. Do not threaten humanity. Do not threaten their allies. The humans were not conquerors, but they were guardians, and they would fight without mercy to protect what they loved. Years passed. The Galactic Compact grew stronger. Species that had never known freedom learned to govern themselves. Worlds that had been stripped bare began to heal. A new era of peace and cooperation began to spread across the stars. And through it all, the human fleet stood watch. Silent, patient, ready. The galaxy had expected humanity to beg for mercy. Instead, humanity had become the mercy others begged for.